And well, we now move on to our very special edition of the race for the White House. Voters in the United States will be deciding on the 5th of November on who their next president will be. The US presidential election was initially a rematch of 2020, but it was upended in July. This when President Joe Biden ended his campaign and endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris. The big question now is, will America get its first woman president or a second term for Donald Trump? And what will it mean for the world, especially India? As election day approaches, we track the polls and the pulse of the American voter, gauging what effect the campaign has on the race for the White House. The race between Democratic candidate Kamala Harris and Republican Donald Trump is playing to the wire with only hours to go until election day. Kamala Harris, remember, is holding several rallies in Michigan, while Donald Trump is jumping between Pennsylvania, North Carolina and Georgia, all crucial swing states. So that's really the focus of the two candidates. Trump, in fact, did visit Virginia and North Carolina on Saturday, while Harris was also in North Carolina and made a surprise appearance on Saturday Night Live in New York City. So lots has been unfolding in the United States of America, in fact, across length and breadth of America. Let's talk about the several reports that we continue to bring to you straight from the US. In the final stretch to the election, CNN News 18's Akanksha Swaroop gets us the special report from Trump Tower in New York as political merchandise has been attracting customers globally.
So there's nothing that the memorabilia of Donald Trump doesn't cover. You talk about a calendar, it's here. You talk about a case for your spectacles or goggles, it's here. And very interesting is this pen.
I will be the greatest president that God ever created.
All right. So the pen also talks about the greatest president that God ever created. Well, that's Donald Trump and his memorabilia for you. What chai is for Indians is what coffee is for Americans. And to do coffee pe charcha, in fact, I'm joined in by Jagdish Sivani. Thank you so much, Mr. Sivani, for joining in on Race for the White House. Let me, in fact, begin quickly by asking you about the phenomenal rise that this US presidential race has seen of Indian Americans. On one hand, you've seen Kamala Harris as the Democratic presidential candidate. On the other hand, the Republicans had Vivek Ramaswamy, in fact, even a Nikki Haley. So have you seen something like this happen in other presidential races?
No, I've been here for more than 36 years. I've never seen like this. And this time, the most important thing is Indian Americans are taking so important part in this election, both in Democratic Party and Republican Party. So it's an amazing, and they are going to play a decisive role. Who is going to be the next president of America? Especially, like I told you, in the battleground state, there are 7 states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada.
Carolina.
Yes.
So why do you say that they'll be playing a decisive role, considering most of them are leaning towards the Democrats?
No,
or are they now also looking towards Republicans?
Till last election, it was like that. But now I have seen slowly Republicans, Indian Americans are leaning towards Republican, especially the Trump. Since Trump was the first president, the number is increasing continuously.
Why so? Why is that happening?
Because they feel that Trump is pro-India, Trump is good for economics, finance. So they're, it's not only India, but they look at their finance also. He's good for the business.
The million-dollar question to end with, who is going to be better for India? Everybody wants to know in India. They keep asking me, is this going to be Kamala Harris or Donald Trump?
Yes, like you rightly said, Trump is openly supporting Hindus and Hindus in Bangladesh. So that's why more and more people, more and Indian Americans are pro-Republican now. But again, coming to that, this race is so tight. Even the experts cannot predict who's going to be the next president. I would say it will be a flip of coin. Till last moment, we will not come to know who is president. But again, saying that, whoever becomes the USA president, whether it's Trump or Kamala, they are going to have a good relationship with India, because this is new India under the leadership of our Prime Minister Modi, and America today needs India to be on their side, whether it is Trump or Harris.
Hey there, a very warm welcome to Race for the White House. I am Akanksha Swaroop and we are coming live to you from the CNN studios in New York City. Now, voters in the United States go to polls in just a day on 5th of November to elect their next US president. The US presidential election was initially a rematch of 2020, but it was appended in July. And that is the voter sentiment that CNN is trying to capture for all of our audience in India as well, in terms of what the situation's like from ground zero. This, when President Joe Biden ended his campaign and endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris in July, things almost took a U-turn for the Democrats. Now, the big question is, will America get its first woman president in Kamala Harris, or a second term for Donald Trump? And what will it mean for the world, especially India? That's what we here at CNN News 18 are decoding for you from ground zero, that is the United States. We have Zaka Jacob from Washington, D.C. I'm, of course, reporting from New York City. And Sanjay Suri will also be bringing you live updates. Now, as Election Day approaches, we are tracking the polls and the pulse of the American voter, trying to gauge what effect this entire campaign has on the race for the White House. The race between Democratic candidate Kamala Harris and Republican Donald Trump is playing to the wire with only hours to go until Election Day. Harris is of course, holding several rallies. And what is the focus on? It is on the swing states, Michigan, while Trump is, of course, jumping between Pennsylvania, North Carolina, even Georgia. All of them, remember, are crucial swing states. Donald Trump visited Virginia and North Carolina on Saturday, while Kamala Harris was also in North Carolina and made a surprise appearance on Saturday Night Live in New York City. Let's try and get in a sense of perspective in terms of where is this race headed to and who's going to be entering the White House finally. And to do that, in fact, I'm joined in today by Taryn Rosecrans, who's a Democrat strategist. I'm also joined in by Shad Connolly, who's a Republican strategist. I'm also joined in by Adele Nazarian, who's a senior fellow at the Gold Institute for International Strategy. I'm told that Dr. Sampath Shivangi will also be joining us in just a bit. But let me, in fact, quickly begin with Taryn, in fact. Taryn, I'd like to know from you, why is this becoming such a tightly fought race? Many critics of the Democrat Party have said that this could have been a sure shot win for Kamala Harris had she not been announced in July. Do you agree?
I think that this race, always with a truncated timeline, was going to be difficult. Let's be honest. So I do agree that the truncated timeline has made it more difficult for anyone in that position with such a short time frame to get through their policies, their positions. That's just a hard time for voters to get to know you. That being said, I think everyone was very hopeful that Joe Biden was going to be able to run again. And he was very popular in terms of with the Democratic base. And people thought that that was going to be the way to go. I don't think this was the plan. And I think, certainly things change and people are jumped and had to be agile to get this campaign on the go. And I think she's been able to do a good job with the circumstances she was handed.
I mean, given the time that she's been given and the kind of fundraising that she's managed, one has to give her that credit. But Shad, if I could bring you in on why this has been such a closely fought battle, especially from the Republican point of view, I think what sort of hit the headlines as far as Donald Trump is concerned are those 3 assassination attempts. You look at the way it's also made it to T-shirts and all the Trump memorabilia. It's also sort of, skyrocketed his popularity so much so that many of the undecided voters are now opting for the survivor that Donald Trump has emerged out to be.
Well, into another war, another endless war. And so I think people are voting on that aspect. And they also see Kamala Harris, they don't really know where she stands. She's not been able to answer basic questions. She didn't have any idea how to distance herself from Joe Biden's policies that are clearly have been failures. And she really didn't have any kind of policy that she stood on strongly. Plus her flip-flops, things like fracking and border security, inner city crime. She hasn't been able to establish her policies in any kind of substantive way. And at least people kind of shaking their head going, I'm not sure I can trust her. And while some people will say, boy, I don't like Trump, but I loved his policies, I think you're going to see Trump pull this out and have a second term.
All right. Adele, if I could bring you in, I think there's a lot of skepticism within Democrat supporters themselves in terms of what will happen to foreign policy, what happens to the ongoing war. We don't really know whether Americans at the moment are impacted by the ongoing wars. But we've seen the kind of protests that are taking place, especially as far as Gaza is concerned. So clearly the Arab Americans are not happy with the ongoing situation in Gaza and now Lebanon, of course, the disturbances in Middle East. But does that really make an impact on the average American voter?
Hi, Akanksha. It's great to be on with you and everyone. It absolutely does make a difference. I think everyone is so sick and tired of these wars. I really hope we don't see a repeat of Vietnam, where there's going to be a forcible draft, let's say, if it's a continuation of the current administration, which would be a President Harris, honestly. I don't see those wars slowing down, to be honest with you. Should she become president again, I see them increasing. I have to say Trump has been, in history, the most anti-war president and has actually had the backing to stand behind his words. I think also it does impact everyday Americans. If you see, this war has directly increased the cost of living. Price increases under the Biden administration again. Groceries are up 21% almost. Gasoline's up 45%. It's crazy. Credit card debt up 44%. The numbers are there. The math is there. And the recent jobs creation report, I have to say, it fell short. And everyone knows that even when jobs reports are released so close to an election, a lot of it is inflated. These are temporary jobs. They're not permanent jobs. And that said, they fell short of what the expectations were. This is going to be a very, very difficult time for everyday Americans going into the 2025 year. And I have to say, Arab Americans, we've seen a big, big turn. They're coming out in the droves supporting Donald Trump for president. And this is unprecedented in the Republican Party's history. And I think a lot of Democrats are waking up to the reality that the party that claims to represent everyone, unfortunately, isn't what they seem to be and have claimed to be. And hopefully we can get away from all this, identity politics and race baiting and looking at someone based on their gender or their ethnicity and go based on merits. That's what it's about. That's the American way. And that is the way that that everyone's given an equal opportunity. And I see that honestly happening more under Trump than
That's an interesting point that you're making, because whether or not they are impacted by the wars in terms of their own political ideologies, we can't say, but the economic aspect of it cannot be denied. And I'm going to, in fact, be taking that question forward with the strategists as well. But let me bring in Dr. Sampath Shivangi, who's the president of the Indian American Forum for Political Education. She's also joining us live right now. Thank you, Doctor, for joining in. I think what's particularly standing out is the way, the role that Indian Americans have played, particularly in the presidential election of 2024. I'd like you to shed light on that, not to forget the fact that, we've also seen many of them who have been traditionally leaning towards the Democrat now choosing to look towards the Republicans as well.
There is a great swing of Indian Americans towards President Trump in the last several days. Earlier, there was confusion between people who were not sure whether Kamala Harris is pro-Indian, she is Indian heritage or Indian American, which she did not agree on any of those three facts, because if she says she is Indian American or Indian heritage, she is going to lose all the Black and African American support, because they are electing her or voting for her because she declared she is African American or she is a Black American. So that is her biggest point. Why would she care about, Indian, maybe 1% of the votes of Indian Americans? Actually, as I mentioned before, 6 years ago, when she was a US Senator from her state, I questioned her. I said, can you describe who are you, so that people know whether you have any Indian heritage or Indian American? Because her mother is very close to India. She was very close to her grandfather, and she walked the beaches of Chennai all those years. I thought she'll be more pro-India, but she denied. Why would she care for a 1% vote compared to 18, 20% African American votes? So that is my possibility. But she met Modi twice. I was there in both the meetings. Actually, 8 months ago, or maybe 10 months ago, she hosted a lunch for Modi when he visited US. He had a big meeting with Biden, I think very consequential meetings. But she met him, but I did not
Dr.
see.
Sampath, many over here are saying that, despite her Indian roots, unlike a Donald Trump who's openly gone on record to in fact condemn the kind of violence that's taken place against Hindus and Christians in Bangladesh, Kamala Harris has not really stood up for the rights of Indians, especially the Hindus. So do you think that factor could also be weighed in by the Indian Americans when they, go to polls tomorrow on 5th of November?
Absolutely, no doubt on that. I may think, she may get maybe 10 to 20% Indian votes who have not seen the news or who are not aware of the facts, who she is. I think people who know who she is, we have nothing against her personally. She is a great personality, a great friend of many people. But I'm, pro-India, I'm Indian American. So I always look for the interest of India, how India and US can work together and make it a better world. But she hasn't joined that group.
All right. Let me quickly, in fact, bring in Taryn. Taryn, much of the Bidenomics was lauded, especially after how the Democrats, in fact, worked towards a consistent sort of economic recovery post-COVID. But we've seen that now take a hit because of the ongoing wars, as I think the others have also been highlighting, including Adele. How will the Democrats, in fact, look into the financial aspect of it if they were to come to power? Because there's not been any solid, concrete assurance coming from Kamala Harris when you look at the wars. Yes, she's condemned what's happening in Gaza, but will she put a stop to the wars, something that Donald Trump's been very vocal about?
Yeah, I think actually Kamala has been very strong in this area and will be very strong. She's the vice president. It's a very difficult road and needle to thread. And I think we need to give her that credit. And I will say one thing with Indian Americans, there's a very interesting poll that has come out that shows that there's a lot of support among women who are very much in favor of her and have been very supportive of her policies. So it's interesting, as you were speaking about this with her economic policies, that you were not feeling very supportive of her and of her policies. And I was finding it very interesting because I do know there was quite a bit of support around it. I do think that her, 45 economic page policy that she's put on a new way forward about what she wants to do for the economy is going to help move that opportunity economy forward. That's actually going to put money back into the pockets of people, will help to restart the economy a little bit. As you said, that has started to stumble a little bit based on the wars and some of the other stuff that's going on. I think she's very much interested in talking about peace and negotiating and trying to figure this out and trying to find real solutions, where Donald Trump is all about divisiveness. He's also shown very much how unstable he is. I don't think that anyone thinks our reputation was improved in the world. Maybe it felt that way in India, but to many Americans, it felt very unstable and not something that was improved upon during the years he was in office. We felt that when President Biden came in, our reputation improved. And while we are facing a war right now, we believe that Kamala Harris could be someone who could actually be a stable and calm leader who might be able to move us forward on negotiating and having something that might not further these agitated, things that we're seeing in the world right now.
Shad, given that Kamala Harris may, still, there may be skeptics who may be questioning the Democrat stance on the wars. The fact of the matter is that it could be the women voters, especially the urban ones, who could cost Donald Trump mighty, because if you look at it in terms of black and white, this election is largely becoming one which is about pro-choice and also because of the outlook on foreign policy. Yes, Donald Trump has scored a 10 on 10 when it comes to his stance on foreign policy. But when it comes to the whole debate about having the access and the right to your own body, this is one debate which Kamala's been winning through and through. Could the women voter cost Donald Trump heavy? Because you know why I also say that? Because you've still not seen a Nikki Haley who's endorsed Donald Trump but still not accompany a Donald Trump at a public rally.
Well, Nikki was my governor in South Carolina when I was state party chairman.
That question's for Shad.
Yeah, Nikki was governor when I was state party chairman here in South Carolina, and she wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal and said Donald Trump's clearly the best choice. Look, a couple things. For Donald Trump, first president in some 40, 50 years, not to get us into a new war. Ask those 13
she said that because she's part of the Republicans and she has to say that, but she's not really made a public appearance with him at any rally. She's also gone on to say that Donald Trump's campaign is a bit too focused on bromance and is turning out to be a bit too masculine. So when a Nikki Haley, a Republican, who's also endorsing that, what does it mean for the Republican voter?
Well, so I'm trying to get to that. Is it doesn't matter where you're from, what your background is, if you're African American, Indian American, doesn't matter. You got to go buy groceries. And most people know that Kamala Harris cast the tie-breaking vote for the Inflation Explosion Act that has led to all this higher cost. So everybody's going to the grocery stores, and plenty of people who ran against Donald Trump haven't appeared at rallies. That has nothing to do with it. People are going to vote their pocketbooks, and I know that the Harris campaign has tried to focus on a single issue, and that matters to some people. Most people are not single issue voters. They care about everything. And like I said, before you interrupted me, is those 13 Gold Star families that were abandoned, their children were abandoned in Afghanistan in that horrible betrayal of the Afghanistan allies that we had when we left there so horribly a few years ago. People know that's on Kamala Harris's watch. She said that she was one of the last people in the room for big decisions. She cast the deciding vote on the Inflation Explosion Act. She has to own this. The border insecurity, that is hers. And Americans know that. That's why they're going to be voting for Donald Trump.
There has to be,
Adele, do you think this is right? Okay. I don't know who's about to come in because I can only hear you. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Oh, it's Adele. Thank you so much. If I just can chime in there, I want to address a few things, if I may. I think you were going to ask me the next question. The reason that Americans felt unstable at home is because of policies that have been very liberal, progressive policies when it comes to immigration that have unfortunately coddled, allowing anti-American people to continue to take over universities, college campuses, to just completely, I'm sorry to say, take a dump on America, as are Americans themselves. And what's happening now is a complete cultural diversion. If you look at the two different camps, you have, of course, there's an issue when it comes to women voters over the issue of abortion and the right to choose. Of course, the woman's body, it's her choice. But when you're having women that are supporting Kamala Harris going in the streets, bouncing their, banging on the drums and actually doing some kind of ritualistic call, actually promoting abortion and killing life, like it's some kind of a party and celebration, that's an abomination. And you also have people like Jennifer Lopez, who's connected with P. Diddy on those underage sex tapes. You have Cardi B, a prostitute.
That's a very interesting point that you've made, because I do you think that the kind of endorsements we've seen from Hollywood biggies like a Beyonce or even a Jennifer Lopez, is this going to really work in the favor of a Kamala Harris, or could this really backfire given the kind of controversy we've seen sort of snowball after the entire P. Diddy scandal?
So here's what I think will happen. I think what's happening is a complete cultural phenomenon, a complete culture war. If this is continued to continue unchecked, we're going to see conservative values that hold together a family structure, good values, be overtaken by, I'm sorry to say, disgusting values. And it's going to be the continual toxic degeneration of our society, where children are going to be taught that, being inappropriate and not holding on to their sexuality and their personal, their body, their choice. Okay, it's absolutely right. But for them to flaunt things that are inappropriate to become a norm. And you're going to see bad role models continue to influence our nation's youth. And I think that's precisely what the Kamala Harris campaign, with her endorsements and who she chose to have endorse her, is saying. And you can say all you want about Trump and having that comedian who got on stage and made a comment about Puerto Rico being a floating, island of garbage. It actually is. Puerto Rico has a massive garbage issue. He wasn't referring to the people, the Puerto Ricans themselves. And I think that Trump did come out and condemn that statement and make sure that people knew that he wasn't referring to the Puerto Rican people. But the media went ahead and lied. And he even came out and dressed up.
All right, Adele, I think I would like to bring in Taryn on that note. I'm sure she'd want to come up with a rebuttal to that. Taryn, I think some very strong views being put out there. Would you like to come in?
Yeah, so many different things that were atrocious about everything you said. Starting with the fact that the
I feel the
worst
same about
role
you.
model on earth for our children is Donald Trump. From everything he has said about women, from every disgusting thing he has said about women, he makes my skin crawl that my children have ever heard. The disgusting things he said. I will tell you, he spoke for over an hour and a half at his rally yesterday. He called every woman stupid, including Kamala Harris. There is
He never did
nothing
that.
wrong with debating your opponents, but you cannot sit there and resort to third grade name calling. And in fact, I think third graders might come up with more intelligent arguments to debate policy than that man. It is despicable and disdainful that the leader of our free world would resort to name calling, making up names.
All right. I'm afraid I'm running short of time right now, so we'll have to close the discussion over there. Many thanks to you, Dr. Sampath, Adele, and of course, Chad and Taryn for joining in on this discussion. And in fact, I'm just going to end by saying that, may the best man or woman win. On that note, let's try and get in a pulse of what the American voter is looking for. And I'm joined in by Brian Abel, who's joining me live from DC, CNN's Brian Abel. Thank you so much for joining in. First of all, I'd like to know from you the kind of preparations that are being made now. We are just hours away from polling day, and how will this shape up? Give our viewers a sense of why is the American voting system so unique?
Well, it's pretty unique in terms of it not being a popular vote, right? It's an electoral college, so what we are trying to do here, what the campaigns are trying to do, rather, is get that 270 electoral votes that are needed to become the next president here at the White House. And with this race being so close, too close to call, really, it's anybody's say as to what's going to happen tomorrow night.
How do you weigh in on the swing states, the kind of role they'll play in for Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, whether you look at Pennsylvania or even the Sunbelt states?
Yeah, and Michigan as well, where I'm from, these battleground states, they're critically important. That's why you've seen both of these campaigns over the weekend crisscrossing them from Georgia, North Carolina, those Sun Belt battleground states, Arizona, Nevada, and then also the Great Lakes region of Wisconsin, the blue wall, if you will, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Those are critical because historically Democrats have cleared all three of those battleground blue wall states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, but they did swing back to Trump in 2016 and then back again for Biden in 2020. So we will see what happens this time around.
Brian, how do you compare the campaign styles of Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris? Of course, we've seen how Donald Trump has, in fact, resorted to a lot of rallies, whereas Kamala Harris has kept it more personal, focusing on, go out there, step out and cast your vote.
Yeah, two very distinctly different styles. One's a bit darker, one's a bit more looking forward, if you will, with Vice President Harris's campaign versus Donald Trump's, with some of the rhetoric that we've seen in the last handful of days, to the point where the Harris campaign, one of their slogans is, we're not going back. We are moving forward. And so those are the very different messages that you are hearing from these campaigns. How are they resonating with voters? To be determined still.
Do you think that the deciding factor could very well be the American women? Because I think this debate has finally become about pro-life versus pro-choice. All right, we seem to have lost our connection with Brian, but of course, he's given you a deep insight into what this election campaigning has been like. As I was saying, we're just hours away from where United States, in fact, goes into polls. And the fact of the matter is that this is going to be one pivotal election, because remember, it will be this election which will decide the future course of the world geopolitics. I'm going to be slipping into a quick break, come right back to Race for the White House. Stay tuned to CNN News 18.
It has to do with a little bit of intelligence. And I have a piece of glass over here, and I don't have a piece of glass there. And I have this piece of glass here. But all we have really over here is the fake news, right? And to get me, somebody would have to shoot through the fake news. And I don't mind that so much, because I don't mind that. So I have a piece of glass here. And the problem with that glass is I don't look great on television when you have a 4-inch piece of glass that a howitzer can't go through. No, when you see yourself on television, you say, boy, you're really not very recognizable, to be honest with you, which is good. But here's the problem. So I have glass here, I have glass here. Now, I'm not worried about this. Look, what do I have? A couple of people, and they're friends, generally. There are a couple of people I don't like in that group, but that's like, no, but look at it. Look at it. I have nobody here. What do I need this piece? But where I think I do need a piece is here. What the hell do I know? I must be wrong. I must be wrong. You're probably...
Welcome back to Race for the White House, where CNN News 18 will bring you our live and rolling coverage, uninterrupted one for 100 hours as far as the US presidential election is concerned. Do tune in for all the latest updates and for insights into how this election is shaping up minute by minute. We'll keep you posted. For now, let's also break down for you how the US election actually takes place and what is so critical are the 7 battleground states. CNN News 18's Zaka Jacob, in fact, breaks down all the maths for you. Have a quick look.
It is the race for the White House. They're calling it the closest election in a generation. We'll tell you why. We'll break it down on the magic wall for you. Let's start from 8 years ago, the shock victory of Donald Trump, pipping Hillary Clinton to become the president of the US in 2016. He won with 307 electoral college votes, even though in the popular vote, Hillary Clinton got 48% of the popular vote and Donald Trump manages 47%. In fact, Hillary Clinton had 3% more popular vote, 3 million, in fact, 3 million more popular votes than Donald Trump. And yet she went on to lose because she lost some key battleground states. This was 2016, the shock result where Donald Trump came from behind and defeated Hillary Clinton despite losing the popular vote. Then in 2020, bang in the middle of COVID, after the rather tumultuous 4 years of a Trump presidency, Joe Biden, the Democratic candidate, beat Donald Trump. Donald Trump did not get a second term because Joe Biden swept both the popular vote. In fact, he had more than 50% of the popular vote, a massive difference, 51.3 and 46.9, almost a 5% gap in the popular vote. And more importantly, that 5% gap translated into 303 electoral college votes for Joe Biden and just 235 for Donald Trump. And part of how he managed to do that was by winning some of these battleground states. I'll get to that in 1 second. So 2024, why is it being predicted to be such a close, such a tight race? This is the starting point for Kamala Harris. She starts with 175 strong seats because these are states like California, Washington State, Illinois, and of course the whole bunch of states in the East Coast, all the way from Maine and New Hampshire up in the north down to Maryland and of course the DC area. If you were to look at some leaning constituencies, some Democrat leaning states, you have New Mexico, Colorado, Oregon, Minnesota. Tim Walz comes from Minnesota. So that takes her to 226. So 226